12 professional mixed martial arts fights, 8 UFC fights, 5 former champions beaten, 2 championships won in 2 different weight classes. Alex Pereira's run that we are seeing dating back to November of 2021 when he debuted in the UFC is unlike anything we have ever seen in this sport before. Powhatan, Alex Pereira has defended the light heavyweight championship for the first time successfully after knocking out Jamahal Hill 3 minutes and 14 seconds into the very first round of the UFC 300 main event. This was one of the coldest knockouts that I have ever seen. Jamahal Hill landed a groin shot to Alex Pereira as Herb Dean came to step in to halt the action for Pereira to recover, fix his cup, whatever the case may have been. Pereira quite literally never took his eyes off of Jamahal Hill, put his hand to the side to fend off Herb Dean and say, no. Don't come in here. I'm good. I promise you I'm good. And within 10 seconds of that happening, he flatlined Jamahal Hill and knocked him out cold to defend the light heavyweight championship. He is now 3-0 in the UFC light heavyweight division after a 4-1 run in the middleweight division after becoming a champion by knocking out Israel Adesanya, losing the rematch to Izzy, jumping up to 205 pounds, beating Jan Blachowicz, beating Jiri Prochazka to become champion, and knocking out Jamahal Hill to retain his championship and spoil the return of Jamahal Hill coming back from a ruptured Achilles that had him sidelined since last January. And so there's not a lot to talk about other than that's what happened. 3 minutes, feeling out process, couple shots landed here and there, but not a ton of action. As many expected, I think the first round was expected to be a little slower. Two great strikers with one-punch knockout power that can come at any time. They were feeling each other out. Pereira landed the final blow that ended this monumental night in Las Vegas. And to be quite frank, that means there's more to talk about in the aftermath because let's go back about a month, maybe a little bit longer than that ago. Alex Pereira initiated the thought of if he can win at UFC 300, come out relatively unscathed, he wanted to turn around just 3 weeks later, UFC 301, I believe it's May 4th, if I'm not mistaken, in Brazil and fight again there. Well, step 1 of that plan is complete. He won at UFC 300. Step 2, he came out unscathed, hardly took any damage whatsoever. He got a victory. He defended a title. He's one of the fastest growing superstars in mixed martial arts today. And so what does this guy do? He gets on the post-fight press conference with Joe Rogan and he sticks to his word. He says, yes, I know it would be hard to get a fight promoted in 3 weeks, but I want to fight in Brazil, UFC 301. Let's be honest, that card could use it. Right now, the headlining spot, in no slight toward them, is the flyweight championship fight between Alexandre Pantoja and Steve Erceg. The co-main event came out of left field. Jose Aldo coming out of retirement to fight Jonathan Martinez. A couple other ranked fighters throughout the card, but it's nothing compared to all of the pay-per-views that we've seen, honestly, thus far in 2024. Even if you exclude 299 and 300, 298 was a pretty great card on paper. 297 had a lot of decent fights on paper, 2 title fights. Here we are now, Brazil, 3 weeks from UFC 300 that happened April 13th. Alex Pereira wants on that card, and he wants on that card at heavyweight. He wants to go win a 3rd UFC championship, something that no one has ever done before. We've seen people win belts in 2 weight classes like Alex. We've seen people win belts in 2 weight classes simultaneously at the same time, like Daniel Cormier, Amanda Nunes, Conor McGregor, etc., etc. But the class gets lower. It gets a little bit more rare, right? But no one has ever gone on to win 3 belts in 3 weight classes. We've seen people win fights in 3 different weight classes, like Jessica Andrade, who competed on this card and won, like Conor McGregor, who just got announced to be fighting in June. That'll be a whole nother piece on this Below Average Joe's show. But no one has won 3 championship fights in 3 weight classes. No one has came close to winning 3 championship fights in 3 different weight classes. This is the closest that we have ever been and probably will be for a long time to come. The UFC needs to capitalize on this right now. And this is why. You have a heavyweight division that is in complete and utter lingo. Your undisputed champion is recovering from a torn pectoral muscle. He's getting into trouble outside of the octagon again. I don't want to get into all of it, Jon Jones. He's said his piece and said what actually happened. Go down that rabbit hole and find the information. But regardless, it is more negative headlines on the outside of the octagon for Jon Jones, something that has really damaged his career. You can't take away from what he's done in the cage. I've been on this show and said he's the GOAT, but outside of the cage, the antics have hurt him in terms of his stardom, his name, what have you. But that is your undisputed champion right now, and he is not active. He cannot fight yet, which means we have an interim champion. That is Tom Aspinall. He won the interim title in November by knocking out Sergey Pavlovich, and he's sitting on the sideline with nothing to do. No opponent in sight. He can't fight John because he's injured. Stipe doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall because he wants to fight Jon Jones. Cyril Gane apparently doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall from what I'm hearing in his interview most recently on the MMA Hour. Tom Aspinall doesn't say no to fights. He took the fight against the most dangerous man in the heavyweight division and won on 2 weeks' notice. In the photo of Tom Aspinall sitting front row watching Alex Pereira enter the cage is ice cold. Pereira had the coldest knockout I've seen in quite some time. This photo is ice cold as well. And let us not forget, before the fight with Jamahal Hill and Alex Pereira got booked for UFC 300, Alex Pereira was already hinting at maybe doing a 3rd weight class, a 3rd championship. Tom Aspinall was entertaining that, going back and forth on social media. The built-in storyline is there. You have 2 fighters that clearly will not say no to this, as it will come with a large payday, I would have to imagine as well. It's history for Alex Pereira. It's a legacy fight already, really, for Tom Aspinall if he can get this type of victory. All signs are a go. No damage taken from Alex Pereira. No weight cut. He can just compete openly at heavyweight. He came in at like 230 to 240 pounds at UFC 213. Tom Aspinall isn't the biggest heavyweight in the world. He's the 250 range. I mean, it's not like he's capping the scale and cutting weight to make 265. We've really never even seen anything like this happen. If we have, it's a very far and few between. The most recent example that I can think of goes back to 2020 when Davis and Figueiredo in November 21st beat Alex Perez, turned around December 12th of 2020 and faced Brandon Moreno in the first of their 4-fight rivalry. This won't affect Pereira at light heavyweight. He can still keep his belt and come back down. This is a chance to have a one-off humongous fight, money on the line, legacy on the line, titles on the line. If you're the UFC, I think you need to make do everything in your power to make this fight happen, because this is a very special fight, something that I think the UFC really needs to do to keep this hot streak going. You know, again, every pay-per-view this year has been good. 297, 298, 299, 300. Now you really can bump 301 to compete with these other cards, because 302 in June is insane already, and UFC 303 at the end of June is absolutely bonkers. So from the main event, we go to the co-main event. Zhang Weili, the women's strawweight champion of the world, has defended her title for the 2nd time. She has beaten Yan Xiaonan. She is 25-3, 9-2 in the UFC, a 2-time strawweight champion. Title defenses in both of her title reigns. Zhang Weili is the best female fighter in the UFC right now. She's won 4 fights in a row since her skid to Rose Namajunas, 2 finishes, 2 very convincing, dominant performances in her decision victories over these last two. Lemos was unbelievable. In this fight with Yan Xiaonan, outside of a couple moments where Yan landed some shots that seemed to not necessarily hurt Zhang Weili a ton, but it did stun her, knock her down, knock her back. Take those moments away, Zhang Weili not only won a decision, but she also put Yan Xiaonan to sleep with a submission. And now I believe this came at the end of round one, a rear naked choke where, I mean, it was all but over. Yan Xiaonan, to her credit, never tapped, never quit in this fight. And it was really a great performance from her for the moments that she had offensively, like I mentioned here at the beginning, and defensively here with these submissions, because she never tapped, she never gave up, but she got put to sleep. She was asleep at the end of round one, and somehow the fight went to round two. Somehow the fight ended up going all 5 rounds. There was literally a moment when they go to the corners in between rounds on the broadcast where you hear someone in her corner or the cut man, someone clearly said, "We have to wake her up." Yan Xiaonan was asleep from the choke of Zhang Weili, but the fight didn't end. We moved around two, much more the same success, I should say, for Zhang Weili. She then puts her in an arm triangle choke submission, and Yan Xiaonan still did not quit, still did not tap. She took a ton of unanswered strikes. This fight could have been stopped with the submission at the end of the first and with these unanswered strikes. And if Yan Xiaonan would have tapped, that would make 3 instances here. Unbelievable heart and grit. Usually when you're talking about that in the aftermath of a fight, it doesn't necessarily come off quite as well for the fighter. But Yan Xiaonan did have her moments in the fight, so my hat is off to her, because this was a monumental fight in itself. I don't think people realize how historic this was. This is nothing that has ever happened in UFC history. 2 Chinese fighters competing for a UFC championship. So it's very exciting to see what will come from Zhang Weili, because fight by fight she continues to get better. Yes, she had a couple hiccups here and there, but for the most part, this was a very convincing, dominant performance. Maybe I shouldn't use the word dominant, because that is clearly what happened with her and Lemos. Let's just say it was a very convincing victory nonetheless. And you look at the division and you kind of wonder who could be next. Jessica Andrade, Zhang Weili is already beaten, but that was a few years ago. Andrade did get a big win on this very same card. She's on a 2-fight win streak. But I think it is clear. I think that when Tatiana Suarez is finally healthy and able to compete, you have to run this fight for the strawweight championship. If it wasn't for Tatiana Suarez's history of injuries, very severe injuries at that, she would have already and maybe even still be a champion in the UFC. I don't think people realize how elite of a fighter that Tatiana is. And Zhang Weili is so wonderfully well-rounded. It makes that fight absolutely incredible as a fan of the sport and of this division, to see it continue to flourish right now. That's the fight you have to do next. Tatiana's not booked because she had a fight that had to be scrapped. So you got to do this. Zhang Weili, Tatiana Suarez, 115-pound title next. Oh boy. And now that means we have to talk about the third and final title fight on this card. The BMF Championship. Justin Gaethje, the reigning coming into this card, BMF champion after knocking out Dustin Poirier last July with a brutal head kick, entered to defend the BMF title, something that we had not seen before, against Max Blessed Holloway, the number 2 ranked lightweight in the world versus the number 2 ranked featherweight in the world. BMF title on the line, lightweight title shot on the line, featherweight title shot on the line, legacy on the line. And it delivered. Max Holloway had one of the best performances that we've ever seen, and probably the best performance that he has had since his masterclass that he put on in 2021 against Calvin Kattar. That's an all-timer for sure, 50-42 scorecard, for example. But this right here, to come up a weight class after we've already seen him falter once before in a fight for the interim lightweight title against Dustin Poirier in 2019, that was a unanimous 49-46 across the board for Poirier. He comes back here, this time not on short notice, this time with months and months to prepare his body to make this move, and it was noticeable. Max Holloway was much stronger, much more physically, like you could just see it in his legs specifically. His shoulders looked big, everything. He looked, quite frankly, like a lightweight. And he put on an incredible shutout, borderline shutout. He lost round 4. But outside of that, this was the least amount of damage that Max has taken in quite some time, even in fights that he's been finishing, even in a Korean Zombie fight. He took less damage here in 24 minutes and 59 seconds against Justin Gaethje, the most dangerous, powerful man in the lightweight division. But Max didn't just win a decision, a very clean, dominant decision. He points at the ground like he's been known to do time and time again. We think back to when he fought Ricardo Lamos, where at the end of the fight, he's pointing at the ground, swinging and banging for the final 10 seconds, see if someone falls. If not, we go out on our shield, and we are animals. We are gladiators. He does the same thing here in a fight that he was clearly, it was over. It was won. It would have been 4-1 on all 3 judges' scorecards for Max Holloway. Hand raised, BMF champion. Do what you got to do. Call your shot in the post-fight interview, like I will talk about in just a second. And Max instead decides to point to the ground and swang and bang rock'em sock'em robots with the most dangerous hitter in the lightweight division, Justin Gaethje. Not only does he hardly get hit during those 10 seconds, but he lands one of the most devastating right hands I have ever seen and flatlines Justin Gaethje face first on the canvas. It's one of the most amazing moments that I've seen in my years of watching this sport. I've been watching it consistently, borderline every single week since 2016, 2017, especially 2020 when the podcast started. And even longer if you want to talk casually, as a child, when my dad would have people over and I was just a little kid watching Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture, Rashad Evans, Rich Franklin, the list goes on, GSP, Matt Hughes. This moment right here was one of the most unbelievable moments that I've ever witnessed. And I got to experience it with my best friends sitting next to me. It is a moment I will remember forever. I am a Max Holloway fan through and through. I've got hoodies, t-shirts, headbands, posters, articles written about him. I've got a skateboard autographed by the man. And this was absolutely, I'm close to at a loss for words. The amount of times that I've went back last night and today and seen that moment of the knockout land in the celebration in the crowd, and he embraces his family and his wife. It is like if there was a way to capture that video from up in the second level, the high quality video. And put it in a frame, I would do it. It was that unbelievable to do that in a card of this magnitude, in a fight of this magnitude. Max Holloway was the biggest winner of UFC 300, and probably just like he just continues to build his stardom. He continues to build a legacy that is close to unmatched in these weight classes and just in general in the sport. And then he gets on the mic. He says, "I'm him." He calls out Ilia Topuria, who witnessed this front row, and he looked astonished at what he had witnessed. He calls out Islam Makhachev. He wants to fight everybody. He earned a title shot in 2 different weight classes. I kept saying it going into this, that if he were to win, he could be a number 1 contender rightfully in 2 weight classes. Now we know what's happening at 155. We'll talk about it at least. I haven't talked about it yet here. Islam versus Dustin. That's what we're getting June 1st for the lightweight title. It's going to be Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria, and my goodness, it looks like it's going to be in Spain. This could be the biggest featherweight title fight in the history of the division, and we're talking about a division that's had Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor, Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, Now we have Ilia Topuria, who I don't think people here in the States anyway realize just how massive of a star he is. And Max Holloway is one of the biggest stars in the game right now. It's going to be fireworks. It's going to be an electric fight that has no shot of being boring. Gold is going to be on the line. Potentially the first UFC trip to Spain. Everything you want in a championship, everything you want in a big fight feel is coming next. Topuria versus Holloway. Part 1 is done. The UFC 300 title fights, 2 of them were unbelievable. One of them was a great fight, a very solid scrap. Alex Pereira has a chance to make history in his next fight. Zhang Weili has a chance to continue this run of terror in the strawweight division against who I hope is Tatiana Suarez. And Max Holloway has a chance to be a part of the biggest featherweight fight in UFC history. These 3 title fights embody everything that there is to love about this fight game, about MMA, about UFC 300. And I'm not even done talking about the card. There's still 10 more fights for me to break down. So stay tuned. It will be coming right here on the channel. If you enjoyed my thoughts here, please drop a like, subscribe to the channel. It's been a big last month and a half, 2 months for the channel, and I hope that we can continue to grow and build this community. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. Comment below what you think is next for the winners of these title fights. I always take a look at the comments. I like to comment back when I can, or at least show you some love, like them. What a time it is to be an MMA fan, and I'm just so grateful to cover the sport with the small community that we have. It is just a blast. It's nights like last night at UFC 300 that make me love doing this and watching the sport and creating memories. And I hope you guys all feel the same way about watching these fights. If you have never watched a UFC fight before and you saw UFC 300, welcome to the community. You're welcome here with open arms on the Below Averagers MMA show. You're welcome into the mixed martial arts community as a whole. Jump along for the ride. It's always wild. Also, be sure to follow the show on social media at the BAJ MMA, and follow on your favorite audio platform where I put everything together in one episode. They come out every Friday and every Monday. Spotify, Apple, and many, many more podcasting platforms. Enjoy your week. PFL is coming later this week. There's no UFC card, so it would kind of be unfair to do a PFL full card preview when I haven't the past 2 weeks. So we'll see what comes in terms of content this week, but there could be news and stuff as well. So stay tuned, and I'm out of here.